Thank you for coming out. I'm gonna talk, but if you have questions as we go, please feel free to jump in and ask. Reserve studies are not the most exciting topic that I could think of to present on, but it's very important. And if you've picked up a newspaper in the last 6 months and read about friends or neighbors in Florida who live in HOA controlled high rises, you know that they are in a world of hurt because they didn't fund their reserves. And so the one I read last week or the week before, the special assessment was north of $200,000 because the building is falling, literally falling down. And so
I'm a Florida insurance agent, and the reason being is that the homeowners association, the windows didn't want to spend
Right,
money.
exactly.
Building, and now these poor people can't sell their.
Oh, yeah, would you buy something with a looming?
So they should have kept up with the HOVs along the way, and whoever affords to live there could pay before they would leave.
Right.
Did you let her?
I did not. It is,
We'll give you the money right after. Thank you.
it is,
I fell insurance in Florida.
it is exactly what happens when you don't fund reserves. And it truly is, you can pay me now, or you can really pay me later. And so we're trying to do the pay me now because it's a lot more affordable. So I just kind of like you to keep that number, the 200,000 in the back of your mind as we talk tonight. Because trust me, no matter what I say, you're gonna be anywhere close to that guy, so.
It's not 195.
So HOA reserves. So we have two pieces of budget information. What we have focused on the last couple of years when I've done presentations is the operating budget. That's what funds the HOA and all the functions that it does, the activities in the clubhouse, the landscape contract, snow pushing, I mean, you name it, that's that, and that's next week's topic. The reserves is an entirely separate pot of money. And you set that money aside for use in the future. And the way you know what to do is you hire an outside firm, which the HOA did and paid for during 2024, and they give you a nice report which tells you literally for every asset what's the useful life. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. I tried to condense this down, so I think there's 16 slides, it's way better than 55 pages. The reserves are set aside specifically for asset replacement or preventative maintenance.
Okay.
Yes,
Now, is that just for Spring House?
this is just for spring.
Okay.
So how can they be used? Replacement of a component or asset that is already in existence. So I tried to give examples from Spring House, such as replacing the roof on the clubhouse. Now, that's not happening tomorrow. It's not happening anytime soon. But at some point, well down the road, the roof has a useful life. It's going to need to be replaced. What happens if the roof gets a hole in it? And we don't have to replace the whole roof, but you can fix the hole and so it's not leaking. That's an acceptable use for HOA reserve funds. You can't pay to create something new. So, shockingly, I am asked all the time about when are we getting a second pool? When are we adding more pickleball courts? When are we gonna have a second clubhouse? Okay? Leaving aside for the moment, the question, could we afford any of those things? You can't use reserve funds for that. So as you see the balance start to build over the years, there's a natural inclination to go, gee, you know, I'd like to have fill in the blank, whatever your interest is. Can't use them for that. So it protects the stability of our finances from irregular yet predictable expenditures. So, for example, let's get something that's a little less draconian. If you've been in the fitness room, we have all sorts of fitness equipment in there. We have a contract for maintenance of that equipment. Well, there's a guy who comes out and fixes whatever and does preventative maintenance. Paid for out of the operating. Some of those pieces of fitness equipment will wear out over the next few years. They're going to need to be replaced. So in the budget, you'll see as we get there, in a couple of years, there's a line for replacing fitness equipment. Now, the thing about reserve studies, they take an all or nothing approach. So for the fitness equipment, we have 13 pieces of cardio equipment. That's the bikes, the treadmills, the elliptical, those kinds of things. The reserve study assumes that all 13 are failing at once. And so they budget for you to replace all 13 in a given year. Of course, reality tells you that's not what's going to happen. So you gotta kind of finesse, and I'll talk about how we have finessed this to get to where we are. So knowing what you got is a good first step. And it gets to be really minute, like every one of these are in the reserve study. But sooner or later, we're gonna have to start replacing chairs. Every one of these is in the reserve study. And sooner or later, we're gonna have to start replacing these tables. The long tables like this are in there. That we're projecting through is in there. If you can think of it and it's here, it's probably in the reserve study as an asset. So we do maintenance on a lot of things, but it doesn't get paid for out of the reserves. For instance, we power wash the pickleball courts. This has been particularly challenging the last few months as they've been working, grading and preparing for phase 5. And the monsoon winds that we get, like last night, that do nothing but blow dust all over everything around it. Well, if you don't clean those, that's dangerous. Somebody can slip on that. And so we do preventative maintenance in terms of power washing the pickleball courts every so often from a safety viewpoint. Window cleaning. We get the windows in this building cleaned twice a year. We got a lot of windows, in case you haven't noticed. That's regular maintenance. It's not a reserve fund expense. Infrastructure items like roofs, mechanical equipment. So think HVAC, like the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. Need to be replaced. That's what, so the things are generally not a lot, but some of the items are very big ticket items in terms of cost. A chair, not so much. An HVAC system, absolutely. So what's a reserve study? So it's recommended that you do a reserve study every 3 years. And every other reserve study is an on-site visit. That means where they actually come out, they meet with the board, Justine, Frankie, ops, everybody. And they want to see they've got the current one, and they want to see every asset that's listed there. So they can make a judgment about how the reserve study is going. The first reserve study was done in 2021. That was an on-site visit. Because they'd never been here before. So they came and they counted and they looked and they met with mostly Oakwood people at that time. And they put together the reserve study. 3 years later, 2024, we're doing what's called an update. So they did not come out. They talked to Frankie, they talked to Kelly. They did a draft. The operations committee looked at the draft. We had many questions and many revisions we wanted them to make. So we had a joint meeting with the board and the reserve study author. to make those changes, which he did. So then they do a final document, that's what that is, the final version. So, we talked about some assets. So they project a useful life. And how the deterioration of that asset can be measured. Now, like this chair. Okay, if one of the cushions gets a rip in it, the integrity of the chair is still solid. We may want to fix or patch or whatever the rip in the cushion. If a leg falls off, we're probably not patching that because it's a safety consideration. So even within each asset, it sort of depends on what's going on here. Can it be fixed? Can it be fixed and be safe? Or do we need to replace? So they project the replacement cost. So one of the assumptions is they build in an annual inflation rate into the numbers. Because a reserve study projects out 30 years. So ours goes from 2025 until 2055. I'm here to tell you, in 2055, when the 30 years are up, I don't think I'm gonna really be worrying about it that much. Okay? And if I am worried about it, I'm not worried about it from the front of the room, I'm worried about it back there in the chairs. So, useful life, the length of time that the component serves its original function. Manufacturers estimate the useful life. The reserve company has a huge database. So they have experience with stuff. We're not the only clubhouse that has chairs or tables or a roof or any of those kinds of things. So they go into their database and they look to see what's their experience been. If we don't do maintenance on stuff, it's gonna shorten the useful life. So one of the ways to think about this is your own house, right? So you may have a refrigerator in your house. You probably remember the days when refrigerators easily lasted 25 years or longer. And you may be in the position, like we were, where after moving to Springhouse Village 4 years ago next week, we've already replaced our refrigerator. When we did that, we talked to the person at the store where we bought the new refrigerator. The anticipated useful life of a refrigerator these days, 7 to 10 years. So each of you do a sort of reserve study on your own assets. So that when something breaks, which we all know happens at the most inconvenient time, from a personal level and from a financial level, you have some sort of plan or money set aside to deal with it. Because you're not gonna live without a refrigerator, at least not for very long. Same thing with your clothes washer, your dishwasher, your dryer, all of those kinds of things. Sooner or later, your home is gonna have the roof replaced. Okay, that's not an HOA expense, that's a you expense. So you can try to ignore that or hope that somebody else owns your house by the time that happens. But sooner or later, it's gonna have to be replaced. So, like I said, they assess the condition of the assets and they determine the replacement cost. And then they give us a big table of charts. They talk about fully funding the reserves, which is the worst phrasing I can ever think of. Because when I think fully funding, I think 100%. Right? Sort of logic. That's not what fully funded means in a reserve study. Fully funded means 70% or more. Because they recognize not everything is going to fail in the same year. And so being at 70% helps you absorb anything catastrophic and early and not run your reserves to zero. Okay? So percent funded. So under 30% have a high risk of special assessments. I've done my time standing in front of you talking about special assessments. I've done it once. I'm never doing it again. Okay? Reserve fund less than 30% is considered, 30% is considered weak. Reserves that are 70% funded or above. Little chance of a special assessment. Now. If we went from where we are today and tried to go to 70% next year. Okay, that would really be a bad strategy. None of us would like that. But we're gonna come back to that. I just want you to keep that 70% number in mind. So. We, the operations committee, took a look at. The next several years. And you'll notice, it doesn't look too bad. 28's up there a little bit until you get to 2030. And in 2030, if every one of these things happen. We'd be spending almost $414,000. So our view on operations was, how do we get the funding that's envisioned in the reserve study? Which takes a huge jump if you follow what they say next year. How do we get to the same place by the end of 2030? Because the things you got to replace are the same. Whether it's what number we start with, what number they started with, some other number, this is what's going to fail allegedly during that time. So as long as you can put together a plan to get you to the same bottom line funding as on 12/31/30, how you get there doesn't really matter. So just a few things. Concrete repair. So what is concrete repair? Not alleys, because that's the city. Not sidewalks, that's the city, but walkways. Okay. Over here in the common area,
Are we talking about driveways?
we're not talking about driveways. So. This is not the full cost of all of the concrete in the build in the community, it's 5%. So you might say, well, we could put that off. Yeah. But sooner or later, we're gonna come back to another concrete repair. Which is another 5%. Well, look what's happened to the price. Why did that happen? 3% per year across all those years. Asphalt seal. We haven't done asphalt seal. So think of the asphalt path down Holly Springs. A lot of you walk that multiple times a week. Back and forth the mailbox, whatever. This year we filled some of the egregious cracks that were in it because it was a safety hazard. This asphalt seal is not that. This is where they bring the machine in and lay down a new coating of asphalt across the top. Preserves the life. Okay. Here's some bigger ticket items. Talk and paint the clubhouse exterior in 2027. They're a big building. Right? Replace the AV equipment. That's this thing, computers, wiring, server, all that kind of stuff. Recoat the pickleball courts. Okay, so again, you see that there are some bigger ticket items. Here's the cardio equipment. Right here, $72,666. That's 13 pieces, not one piece. Okay. Irrigation clocks. Those are the big ones in the community, not the one on the side of your house. Sorry. Now, personally, I see zero chance that in 2026 and 2029, we're going to spend $0 out of the reserves. We've all been around long enough to know that stuff happens. Even when you don't want stuff to happen, it happens.
Should we put something in there anyway?
We have taken into account. So, and in 2030, like I said, lots of stuff here, lots of stuff. So, like I said, when an asset reaches the end of its useful life, the reserve study envisions all of that asset being replaced. So they don't say replace 50 chairs, they say replace all the chairs. But you probably don't have to do that. The useful life does not account for the fact we're a 55+ community compared to like facilities in communities that have a broader age range. Okay? So we may have certain things that as more mature people, we take better care of than if that same piece of equipment was somewhere where there were less mature people. Okay, but they don't adjust for that. And this is really an important thing, because you're probably thinking there, 2030. Well, hopefully I'll be around by 2030. 2040. Well, maybe not. 2050. Looking less likely. Okay, so how about this? It's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem way out there in the future. Let's let them worry about it. Okay,
You gotta be Florida.
and that's Florida in a nutshell, right, Barb? Okay, roof, paint, asphalt, elevator, all that stuff starts deteriorating the day. It's like when you buy a new car, right? You drive it off the lot. Your insurance company is assessing you for insurance, the price you paid for it. If you drive down the street and go, you know, I don't think I like this, I think I made a mistake. And you turn around 2 days later and go back, you're probably not getting that same price back because your car has depreciated. So they start going, the useful life starts ticking the day it's put in. Okay, the cost of ongoing deterioration is as real as any other invoice. We just don't get a bill for it every year. Except funding the reserves. So. This is from the reserve study. Okay, this is from the reserve study. I'm going to start at the bottom. We operations put together an alternative funding plan. But I wanted you to see what the reserve study said. Okay. Says our starting balance will be $94,474. That's as of 1/1/25. Remember, we talked about below 30% is weak and you're at risk of a special assessment. On 1/1/25 with $94,474, we would be 14.5% funded. That's a problem.
So wait a minute. And this is where we're gonna start. In 2025, there's gonna be a lot more homes built.
We accounted for that. We accounted for that. You're right. Got more people paying, and that's the only reason this is gonna work out. And you'll notice I put it right up here. Oakwood's numbers, not operations, will have 349 closed homes. That means papers have been signed. You know, it belongs to somebody other than Oakwood as of December 31st. Oakwood projects closing 48 homes, 4 per month during 2025. So 349 plus 48. To calculate, you need the median number, right? Because some months it's gonna be below that median number, you hit the median number in June, and then the last half of the year, you're above the median number, and it all balances out. So our median number, the one we use for calculations, is 373. How do we get that? 349 plus 1/2 of 48, which is 24. They recommended that the total contribution be 175,000. Spread out over 4 quarters, 12 months, however you look at it. So that would mean if we did that, we took 175,000 divided by 373, because that's the number of homes that are going to be contributing, and then divided by 12 to get a monthly number, dues would go up $39 a month. This is where Barb's point. And the point about, you don't have to solve this problem in 1 year. Come into play. Because we're still, at 373, we're still more than 120 homes away from build out. So in 2026, there's gonna be more homes. In 2027, there'll be more homes, hopefully Oakwood's done by the end of 2027. Okay, so we have to account for these additional homes who will be helping all of us who already live here solve this problem. Reserve study didn't do that. Okay, so that's why you're gonna see such a big discrepancy in the numbers. So, side by side. Blue on this side is the reserve study. Kind of brown color on this side is the operations committee. So you go across the years because the rows go across. So in 2025, like I said, the reserve study said, pop up 175,000. We said, yeah, too much. How about 127,283? You're probably thinking, well, what did they throw a dart at the wall and come up with that number? The 50,550, you went back to the slide where we had what was happening every year, that's that number. And we went in the year with 176,734. So we've closed the gap, but we haven't caught up entirely yet. Okay? The numbers in the reserve study as you go down, go up 3% per year. So if you take 175,000, multiply by 3%, and add the answer back to 175,000, you get 180,250. Okay? So, rather than going through all of this, let's look where we are. 1,131,972. Between 1/1/25 and 12/31/30, with $646,965 in anticipated expenses. Here, 1,123,044, same 646. The difference is $3,402. We get even by the end of 2030. Now, how do we do that without assessing everybody $39 a month? We took. Let me start again. When Oakwood closes a home, they pay the HOA $1,760 for every home. One-time money. Happens only when they sell it for the first time. So if you sell your house tomorrow, there's no $1,760 coming to the HOA. You're gonna pay a fee, rate. But that's not spring house.
Is it 2%?
I don't know what, Ron? Day rate 0.5?
The, what, that, by law, 0.5 is the most you
Yeah.
should have.
So. We changed the starting balance a little bit, 100,000, because we've had a few more months to see where we are than they did when they did the reserve stuff. Okay. We're still at 14.5%, that $5,000 meant nothing, essentially. Inflation rate 3% after tax interest. Here's one of the things, even though any HOA is a not-for-profit, they're not a 501c3. So you do have to pay taxes on the interest you earn in the accounts. Okay, just that, nothing else. Which of course means you gotta hire a CPA, you gotta, fill out tax forms and all that, so it does get pretty pricey. Same 373. Median number of closed homes, 127,284. Now. What we did is said, hold up. If you think about the operating budget and we're getting $84,480, $1,760 times 48 next year. And we just let that flow into the operating budget. The year after Oakwood is finished, we have an $85,000 hole in the operating budget. So we needed to start weaning ourselves off of counting on that money and putting it where the greater need was. So for 2025, we said, let's split it in half. Half goes to the operating budget, half goes to the reserves. Okay, so that doesn't cost you anything. That 42,000 is just happening. So that left $85,044. So take that, divide by 373, divide by 12 is $19 a month. But you're already paying 15. Right, when you get your quarterly bills now, it's got the regular HOA dues and then at 184 a month, and then the next line down is $15 a month for the reserves. So we're only going from 15 to 19. Okay. That's just the reserves. We're not talking about the operating budget. Okay. So our interest on operations make it, first of all, get there by the end of 2030. Not put the burden completely on homeowners. Scale it so that it's somewhat equal increases over the next few years. So we're not doing 4, 12, 8, 20, but more like 4, 4, 4, that kind of thing. And you saw on a previous slide that we're within $3,400 of the same place. So that's what we are recommending, operations is recommending to the board. That on that piece of your dues, it goes up $4 a month. Okay? And if you look at this column over here, this is our plan. These are the same numbers that were on that side-by-side slide on the right side. Okay, so we'll go the end of 25, 15.4, 23.4, then we get to the yellow range. We get by 2030 and see how it dips, the percentage right here, because we have such big expenditures anticipated in 2030, and then it starts back. Okay. Now, projecting to next year at this time is risky business. Projecting out 6 years is really risky business. So what will happen? Next year, when the operations committee starts through the budget process again, we will look at what's happened. What have we spent? What do we take in? What's the home closing look like? And we'll revise. But we feel fairly confident that we have been very conservative with the income. Because I'd much rather stand up and say, remember last year when I said it was 4, it's only gonna be 3. Rather than, remember last year when I said it was 4, well, it's gonna be 10. I don't wanna do that. So they help. This question, of course, you wanna go back?
For the last one?
Yeah.
I see 15.4% funded at the end of 2025, when we put in 127,000.
Well, because we're expending 50.
Oh, that's right, still at 70,000.
Yes. Yeah, but it's not much on a
Because it
percent.
only goes up 1%.
Yeah,
Wow.
so. The whole purpose of a reserve study, at the end of the day, is to let the HOA board plan ahead. So you don't get caught short. And you don't make bad decisions. Barb has her story. The HOA I was treasurer of in California. We had a board who absolutely was not going to allow a dues increase. And didn't for 7, 8 years. Now, even in times of low inflation, costs are still going up, right? So what happened over those 7 or 8 years? The HOA became unable to pay its bills. This is in California. And believe me, California way micromanages HOAs. It's like the legislature's favorite go-to thing. Got nothing else to do, let's write some new laws for HOAs. Okay? So they had to find some money for operating budget. What did they do? Took it out of the reserves. What happened next? This 93 units, single family homes, surrounded by a 6-foot block wall. All of the block wall failed and fell over. Not towards the HOA, towards the other HOA on the other side of the wall.
Good change.
They had a rather large special assessment because they had to replace what they'd taken out. They had to pay for not only the wall repair on the part that fell over, but they had to get all the other wall sections tested to make sure they weren't going over. And then they had to do the fix for that. It is a fool's game to think you can put this off. And it's all gonna work out in the end. So. I thought this was good, giving us. Questions, comments, anything you want me to go back on? Yes,
Are there any future plans for extension or expansion of common areas?
no.
And how would I was wondering, how does that?
So in phase. I don't know if it's 4 or 5, I think it's step 4. So if you stand at the back corner of the pickleball courts, right there at the corner of Stone Mountain and Gannett Way, and look diagonally across Stone Mountain. There is a park going in there. It's a little over an acre. So it will be green space, essentially. Think of it like the Paseos now. So. There won't be homes there. They're not, that land isn't included in the 493 that's built out for Oakwood. But there will be cost to the HOA because we've got to have a secondary water irrigation controller. You've got to have, certain infrastructure things to take care of that park. But other than that, there's nothing else planned.
And are those figures, allowances in that, in
Yes.
your?
Okay, so this $4 is not, doesn't change my, it's the operations thing. Have we done good this year? Next week?
Next week, I think you will be,
Should I take my blood pressure medicine before I come?
I don't think you'll need to.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it now.
Yeah. The reason I can't tell you is we had something come up this yesterday. And we're still trying to work our way through resolving that issue. I don't believe it will affect what we have proposed, but I don't get to make that decision
Okay,
because I'm not one of the majority Oakwood members on the HOA. But that will be our recommendation, because we have a different way to solve it.
Question online, Mark.
Okay,
Did you say that the reserve study needs to be done every 3 years? If so, why are we paying reserve study fees in 2 years and again at 3 years?
well, we don't have a budget for anything beyond next year. And there's the only money in the reserve study expense for 2025. There's a piece of software that the reserve study company puts out that allows you to do what if scenarios. So the way I was able to produce this table with our numbers on it rather than their numbers on it is I used that software. I could drop in our numbers. The first year is free. So that takes us into 2025, but not all the way through 2025. The money that's in the reserve line for next year is the relicense of that software. It's about $500. Other questions?
Yes, that one, that's, I don't know how to verbalize it, but you initially talked about how you're gonna evaluate the furniture and the.
Not us, the reserve company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then if you add, several hundred homes to the HOA, is that gonna break down sooner than you anticipated it would, and is that factored in?
so far we're seeing most things, not all, last longer than what we anticipated. So for example, let me give you a specific example back here.
what's gonna happen to this kid?
So you'll notice over here. Replace cardio equipment right here. 72,666. Originally, that was slated for next year. And we moved it back Because we talked to the company that does the scheduled maintenance on the equipment. And he said, everything is fine. You shouldn't have an issue. So we felt comfortable dropping it down some years. Remember when I said the board and ops met with the reserve company? Those are the kinds of things we did. We had lots of questions about that. And again, this assumes all 13 will fail in 2028. That's unlikely to happen. And they have you replace like with like. Okay, so if you've been in the fitness room, let's take a treadmill. You know, there's the treadmill and there's the TV screen. And one of the things that we've done away with is the direct TV feed to the TV screen because nobody ever used it. So when the first treadmill needs to be replaced, we'll get a treadmill, but it won't have the screen on it, which will be less expensive, or we can buy a higher quality than the machines that are in there now.
But all of these assumptions have been made with the thought in mind that more
More.
people will be using it.
Yep.
And you'll break down sooner.
Yep.
Okay. That was good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dartboard throw, right?
Always.
Yeah, you didn't really know, but yeah, we did the best we could. Ed?
While we use this room and we charge fee, does any of that fee go towards the ops or not to the reserve fund?
No, it's all operating and we're proposing, board hasn't adopted yet, using some of that rental fee money next year to pay for. So you can see where it would go, a chair rail. And repaint. So, because that's not a reserve expenditure expense. But it needs to be done and it will help lengthen the life.
What happened to? Oh, the chairs.
That's not that people are intentionally doing that, it's just the use of the room, like it said, it was a lot. See?
Does it not make, this is online, this is not Justin speaking. Does it not make more sense to accelerate the growth of the fund by going to $25 per quarter rather than just do the minimum? That way we accelerate the fund to when we are most likely to have more expenses.
So there's all different ways to look at it. You could do that. You could do anything you wanted. You could go anywhere from 0 to, let's figure out what we gotta be fully funded by the end of 2025. 100%. We chose what we chose because residents have faced steep increases in HOA dues / reserve contributions the last 2 years. And we needed to get that train off of that track. So we purposely spread it over 6 years to bring some relief because we know, every person on operations knows we have a lot of residents who are on fixed income. And constantly increasing the dues 25, 30%, like you've seen the last couple of years, is unsustainable. And so we opted for a slower pace. Still getting there within a reasonable length of time. Yes,
I know that, I think I know. But monies that aren't spent on a particular category, they just ride in that fund.
they just ride in the fund. That's correct. So if in 2028, we replaced 10 out of the 13 pieces of cardio equipment, the money for the other 3 would just ride forward until it was time to replace those.
We noticed 1.5% of interest earned. I'm assuming
That's after
that's
tax.
a long-term
Yeah,
projection.
Long-term.
We're not getting that now, right?
no, long-term and after tax. Because then we'll get to pay taxes on
Yeah, but we
that.
should be, we're earning more than that.
Yeah, we're at 5 something altogether.
The other thing was you also mentioned 70% is considered fully funded.
Yeah,
Our goals to get to 100%, are we satisfied with 70%? That's considered fully funded.
I would say if you're asking me, you see where it turns green, it's 2034 and 72%, and then it goes in the 70s for a couple of years. I would say that's probably gonna be the stability point is somewhere in those numbers.
wasn't so good.
I try not, maybe. You gotta remember, what I do to you, I do to me, right? I get a pass on this stuff. So, other questions, comments, anything you don't understand, anything you wanna go back over? Now, this is a recommendation. Right? We have met, operations and the board have met. We have an agreement in principle that the recommendation is what they're going to adopt. Until there are 3 votes at least for the recommendation, it is just that, a recommendation. So when will you know for sure? The board meeting on November 7th. There's a whole bunch of stuff on that agenda. One of which is adopting the recommendation for the reserves and the 2025 HOA budget. So we are free on November 7th at 6 o'clock. That would be a nice opportunity for some more fun and entertainment in the evening.
So when you said the recommendation of our group is this, right?
Yes.
So you're saying Oakwood could say, no, we want more, potentially?
So here's how we looked at it, and we had,
Because they didn't fund it correctly to begin with, so.
Well,
it's hard for them to come back.
it's important to understand that Oakwood met all the legal requirements for funding the HOA and funding the reserves. Now, we might argue about whether the legal requirements are sufficient or not, but nonetheless, they did what they could. Where they are now, they are interested in getting finished. Finished defined as selling the last of 493 homes. Many of the residents are at least as interested as Oakwood, if not more interested than Oakwood, in having them finish. They are very cognizant that you don't want a dues increase to create headwinds for sales. So could they do what you're suggesting? Absolutely, they have the power. I don't see it as likely because they want to, I mean, they've had a phenomenally successful year, right? I mean, if you've driven through the neighborhood, I mean, we've spread that way remarkably a lot this year. So I don't see them jumping off board, and, you know, they did make a commitment that they were on board with this to operations, so I feel fairly confident that this is where it's gonna end up. Other questions, thoughts?
Just a statement on light. Your explanation did make sense on why not to accelerate it. They would like to support accelerating the fund growth so we get to acceptable reserve versus potentially large assessments down the road. A little pain now is preferable to a lot of pain later. Again, not Justine, just reading.
Right, so just a comment, and it goes with how I responded to the gentleman here. One of the things that Ops thinks a lot about is anything we propose, we are well aware we have to get 3 votes. Which basically means because the 3 Oakwood members vote as a block, in case you haven't noticed that come to the meetings. Ron and Sylvia, thank you. They vote to represent the residents, which generally isn't aligned with how Oakwood block votes, but not always. So we know that proposing a faster pace would not get 3 votes. So we felt as operations, it's better to put together a plan that we can get 3 votes for, that over time gets us to the same place, than trying to pick a fight year 1. And we would lose. Okay, well, thank you for coming out. Encourage your neighbors to come tomorrow. Ron, what do you say?
And, every quarter, as you know, if you're writing checks or going online to your bill pay or whatever, there's actually 2 things you're paying. You're paying the dues to the Springhouse Association, but you also are paying the assessments to the Daybreak Association. And just like up, just like Springhouse, this whole thing you see here is going on at Daybreak also. But you may not know is Mark, as chairman of our operations committee here, also serves on the Daybreak Finance Committee. And myself, serving on the Springhouse board, I also serve on the Daybreak board. So we actually at Springhouse have good representation with Daybreak. There is gonna be a meeting on October 30th, which will be the Daybreak Budget Town Hall. At which point the proposed budget, now this has not been approved by the board yet, and this town hall meeting, just like this, will be before the board meets. Will be to present the recommended budget that's going to the board. There will be an opportunity to ask questions. There will also be an opportunity to give your thoughts about the budget itself, just like here with reserves and next week with our budget. So those are you that can attend, and it should be, I'm sure it's going to be in person at the Daybreak Community Center. It'll also be on Zoom. But if you put on your calendar October 30th at 6 o'clock, if you want to attend that meeting, I think it would be very informative.
Yes,
Thank you to the operating committee for all your hard work.
it's a wonderful team and, you know, all of us, I mean, there's different opinions, as you would expect with any group of 11 people. But at the end of the day, we, I think, do a great job of keeping our eye on the ball where we want to go. That's the best thing I can say. Everybody pulls with an oar in the same direction. Right, thank you.
Thank you.